on Council's website for a minimum period of 6 months. In accordance with Council policy, I will now ask staff to confirm that the recording has commenced.
Yes, it has, Mayor.
Thank you. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the South East Nation, the Malacadee people of the Yuin River, and the Lilaquani people of the far south. We recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. In attendance tonight we have Deputy Mayor Thorpe, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Jessup, Councillor Gibson, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Camber-Smith and Councillor Burgess. Acting General Manager, could you please introduce your staff?
Yes, joining us here tonight, Director of Governance, Strategy and Sustainable Development, Matthew Grimsey, Acting Director People and Corporate Services, Raylene Watson, Acting Director Community Wellbeing Services, Lyle Ground, and Acting Director Infrastructure, Climate and Environment Services, Sue McCarter. We've also got supporting staff in Kelly Davis, our Media and Communications Coordinator, and Sandy Rustel, our Executive Assistant.
Thank you. 2.1, we don't have any apologies. 2.2, we have leave of absence, Councillor Temby. And 2.3, no absent. 3, declaration of interest. Councillors, does anyone wish to declare an interest in any of tonight's agenda items? Yes, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to declare an interest, please, in agenda item 10.016/23.
Thank you very much.
Do you need this piece of paper?
You just passed up the front, that's fine, thanks.
Please.
Confirmation of minutes, 4.010/23. The recommendation, do I have a councillor to move the minutes as circulated are confirmed for the special meeting of Council, Monday the 25th of September 2023, the ordinary meeting of Council, Wednesday the 27th of September 2023, and special meeting of Council, Monday the 9th of October 2023. Do I have a councillor to move that, please? Councillor Jessup, thank you, and seconded. Councillor Gibson. Do any councillors wish to make any changes? No? Well, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Burgess? Yep, thank you. That's all councillors. And the motion is carried. Number 5, legislative items. Acting General Manager, are there any legislative items?
Not tonight.
Thank you. Urgent matters?
None tonight.
Thank you. I have a couple of Mayor's announcements, but I'll let you go first, Councillor Jessup. You wanted to make an announcement, I'll let you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let the councillors know that I attended the Huon Zoning Association AGM on the weekend. And as some of you know, that's an organisation I was involved in the early days of before I became a councillor. One of the interesting things that they obviously have been very involved with the TPC, supporting 185 individuals with their representations to the Tas Planning Commission. And they also did their own submission, which I think we know about as we've talked about it. But I wanted to note that the new members of the committee, so the outgoing members of the committee, I think are Caleb Enoch, who's here, and Belinda Yaxley, thank you. But the new committee is Amy Robinson, President, Nigel Goodwin, Vice President, Nathaniel Alcock, Secretary, and Ian Mayer, Treasurer. And I wish them good luck with their work.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have just a couple of announcements. I'd like to start with taking this opportunity to extend my thanks to Jason Brown, our past General Manager, and wish him every success in the future. I'd also like to welcome Lockie Krantz into the role of Acting General Manager, and I know I speak for all councillors in saying that to thank you for not only filling the acting position, but for your dedication to making sure that everything is business as usual. So thank you. I acknowledge that the community have an expectation to know why, when and how things happen. Legal advice obtained from Simmons Wolfhagen further confirms that the information relating to the resignation of the General Manager is indeed confidential personal information at this time. The amounts paid to the General Manager in respect of his departure from Council will be required to be disclosed in the Council's annual report. The annual report requirement is the legal mechanism for which provides for the disclosure of the otherwise confidential information at that time. Further questions relating to the General Manager's departure from Council will not be answered. So from today, the councillors, staff and myself are looking forward and working hard for the positive future of our valley. The other was a media release that we put out on the 17th of October to do with the Tasmanian Fire and Emergency Services reform. On that, we've been advocating hard with the government over this state government levy. There was submissions are open on the it's fire.tas.gov.au website, and it was to close on the 5th of November. We have an extension now through LGAT till Friday the 1st of December. So we've received some extra time there to be able to get our submissions in. And we are working really hard with the government on that. Okay, I think that's all I have for now. That's it. Okay, so public participation, public question time. 8.1.1, answers to previous questions taken on notice. As we all know, that all the answers to all the questions are on our website. 8.1.2, the questions on notice. There were 6 questions and the answers to those are on the website. And we had 8.1.3. There was 2 questions emailed through for tonight's council meeting, and the same there on the website. From the gallery, welcome to public question time. If you have a question as the chair, I will ask you to come forward to the microphone and identify yourself by name and area where you live. To make things fair and equitable, we have a limit of 2 questions per person. We normally allocate around the 15-minute mark. All questions must be directed to me as the chair, and then I will forward on if need be.
Glyphosate-based herbicides, the council sprays a year.
I'll pass that one through to you, Acting General Manager.
I'll take it on notice. I don't have it on me right now, but we keep careful records of the volumes we use of all herbicides, and we can provide that and make it publicly available.
Thank you.
Okay, so if that's the end of questions. Okay, thank you very much. 8.2, deputations. Do we have any, Acting General Manager?
No.
No?
No.
Thank you. Okay. We're on to agenda number 9.008/23, the petition regarding council's use of glyphosate and other chemical herbicides. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Camber-Smith. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gibson. Councillor Camber-Smith, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, please, Mayor. I've got a little speech here, so bear with me.
It's fine.
I'd never considered glyphosate a particular problem until I read about aerial spraying on glyphosate-ready monoculture crops in South America and how it had resulted in an unusual amount of birth defects in the local populace. You'll all know I'm a bit of a science nerd, so I do listen to all these things and they are peer-reviewed. I've also been reading up on the effects of glyphosate on our gut microbiome and how it might be partially responsible for the widespread diagnoses now of IBS and autoimmune diseases. It can persist in soil for almost a year, be taken up by plants and ingested. Council is actually a low volume user compared to farmers who regularly use it to burn off crops such as potatoes prior to harvest, which I think is poor practice. It's one of these chemicals that is ubiquitous, but were it to be introduced now, it might not fly under the radar quite so readily. It's not a forever chemical like PFAS, but because its use is so widespread, it's in everything, including us, just like microplastics are now. Therefore, while I recognise that council has to manage invasive weeds, vegetation in drains, gravel and paving, etc., we do need to recognise that we're just adding to the problem. Where we can set a good example, we ought. Therefore, I have some questions on the report and recommendations. If I can just say those questions, if I may. What applications do we currently use glyphosate in? Are there alternatives that can be used cost effectively in some of those applications, e.g. the soft fall in playgrounds? And can we use more of the products that we were looking at once before about the concrete matting, etc., in drains that was being trialled that would require pumping out rather than spraying? Thank you.
Sure. So applications, we use it for all roadside spraying to keep our sight lines clear and keep vegetation back from damaging the edges of roads. We use it in our parks and playgrounds and on footpaths, etc. We use it judiciously, and as I explained in the report, we are herbicides are expensive, so we're doing everything we can just from a cost perspective to minimise their use. Residents would have noticed the amount of additional mulching, etc., that's gone on in our all of our council parks and reserves, in particular over the last 2 years. Part of that has been, one, it's an improved amenity outcome. It saves water, but it's also suppressing weeds, and that's meant reductions in the use of glyphosate. And the guys will hand weed whenever they can. We also use competitive planting and are trialling to use that more and more intensively. I think there's big opportunities to use that in drains in particular. You mentioned the concrete matting. Yes, we've run one trial of that. Yes, it has. There's applications for that. That doesn't obviate the need for spraying necessarily. Because they do trap sediment, and weeds will be the first thing to seed in there. And if in between mechanical clean out or pumping clean out, they need herbicides will be the only option to knock weed back out of those areas.
I understand there is a product now that's almost like sorry, I didn't press it not hard enough. I understand there is a product now that you can put into drains. It's like it sets like concrete, so it's more solid than the actual mat that we've trialled. I think they've used it in Kingborough in a few places. So you sort of roll it out, wet it, and it sets, so it makes basically like a half pipe.
Concrete cast,
Yeah.
Same thing, you'll get sediment accumulating in it,
Sure.
and seed will set in that. and whilst it may be better, between those, we can't guarantee we'll be in there to mechanically remove that sediment before weeds will sprout. Look, there's many options that can lead ultimately to the reduction in herbicides, and we're trying everything we can. Unfortunately, herbicides still just play a significant role. Ultimately, we could be out there hand weeding, we could be out there hydro mowing the roadsides constantly. It comes down to the financial limitations that we have, and the community's willingness to pay for an alternative. We've seen trials run by other councils where it's costing 10 times more for a less effective weed treatment program. So that's the reality. We're not invested in glyphosate as a chemical or a chemical company, or herbicides indeed. If there was a viable alternative, we would adopt it tomorrow.
As there are large areas where people are on the no spray register where we don't spray, and that's not an issue. So why do we do quite so much?
They are an issue, and
Okay.
they become an issue annually. Not all of them, but many of them become an annual issue when we start the fire abatement program. Ultimately, if people are making a choice to control weeds themselves, that treatment, if it's not a herbicide treatment, it's a manual treatment, and for many people, that is then backbreaking work on the roadside for them to maintain that themselves. And many of those sites, it shows the inadequacy of their efforts to do that, which means that when fire abatement season comes, they're getting letters to go through and do that, and unfortunately many of those end up having a herbicide application because it is the only way to deal with it, or significant cost that's borne by that landowner as they're making a choice to not have herbicides. And I should say there are many people as well who do make the investment themselves and are able to keep on top of it, but it is a big commitment.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Councillor Gibson?
I'd like to stop using glyphosate across the valley straight away.
Microphone.
Sorry. I would love to stop using glyphosate through council straight away. I mean, climate change pretty much demands that we have to stop using.
And weed ingress has increased, and then they've reverted to. I think you'd roll that up into a wider conversation as part of our budget process. And in terms of is it possible to work out what the impact on rates is? Yes, we'd just work out the cost of that program relative to the cost of what spray costs us at the moment. 1% of rates is $140,000. We just work out what it ends up being in a rating sense.
Could we then, just as a part of this, respect to this petition, include that in the next budget discussion?
That we specifically table that as part of our budget discussions?
We'll just have it as a line item in there for discussion, so that we can actually make a conscious decision about, because it's always easy to say it's too expensive, but at a certain point you've got to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like dealing with climate change, you can't just bury your head in the ground forever.
Sure.
So
yeah, if you'd like to make an amendment to it, put it to the councillors.
yeah, I'd like to put an amendment in.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah,
Because
because it's
The seconder can't move an amendment.
yeah.
The mover could agree with the seconder.
I'm happy to accept that, and I'd also like to consider another clause in there that we commit to not using glyphosate in soft fall areas in playground.
But there is nothing to suggest that if it's not okay to use on a park in general or on a roadside, there's nothing to suggest that it's any more dangerous to use near a playground. So if applied appropriately, which we do each time. So I think if we're using it, and we're using it appropriately. We're not starting to draw out, we don't use it here, we don't use it there, where they're accepting it or not.
Young people are far more susceptible to the harms caused by chemicals, as I know to my own cost, having exposed widely to things like metacystox as a youngster growing up in an area where aerial spraying was still going on.
Having seen the 1,000-litre containers of this chemical that Roberts sell for farming, yeah, I would hope that the amount of this chemical that the council uses pales into insignificance with the amount of glyphosate that is already in French fries and all those other products. So I think let's look at it in context. But I am very supportive of a level of transparency, and the acting general manager has already said that we record the chemical use that we have. So I think that would be good if we could find some way to publish that so the community can be aware. But I think also the other thing around maybe the no spray areas, let's actually encourage ratepayers to take some responsibility of reducing this chemical use if they want to. And there are numbers of ways. So, for example, I have a no spray register because the council managed to kill half my hawthorn hedges, which I was not happy about, but we manage it ourselves. So you could go on the no spray register and you could remove that chemical from your front verge. But also, if you live in Franklin or Cygnet and you've got a pavement out the front of you that's got weeds growing in it, I'm sure if you pulled those weeds out once a fortnight, the council wouldn't be spraying them. So I think people can take some individual responsibility to do this, as well as longer term looking at alternatives and being open to alternatives. But if I can encourage
Or glyphosate or anything
of
else.
course. And glyphosate is amongst the herbicide brews that are out there. Glyphosate is considered by many to be
Yes.
a lesser harm.
Yes. I know, and it depends which side of the fence you're sitting on, and quite now I'm just sort of sitting on the fence at the minute. But I also wonder too, like in the recommendations, because I know this has been an ongoing topic for years.
Yep.
It's not a new debate. Could we perhaps add something to
All welcome stuff,
Yeah.
valuable stuff that we need to do. So if that's the mood for glyphosate, I mean, there's no staff member that is, like I said, wedded to using this thing.
Well,
it's
that's
whether
it.
there's a willingness to
that's it. And
accept the alternative.
I think it still has a place and it still needs to be used, because quite frankly it has to be sprayed on the side of the road. There is no simple way to get rid of that, and if you don't do it, there's going to be complaints across the board. It is going to be expensive to use other forms of weed removal, etc. But I'm just sort of wondering if somehow, even if it's not in the budget, even if it's a discussion that we could hold with property owners to try and encourage them to manage their front and their verges and whatever, perhaps it might cut down the use of the glyphosate to perhaps a level that the community might respect a bit more.
Yep.
Maybe.
So, I mean, just further promotion and addressing the content that's on the no spray register.
Areas that have just been left wild with paths just mowed through them and around the edges and stuff.
Do they have snakes?
Yeah, of course they do. Adders, yeah, and they're just as they're pretty poisonous. But it's just sometimes it's just a different mindset, as well, because although I know we're more prone to fire, but often when you spray grass that's reasonably long, you make it more drought, hard. It's less drought resistant and it's more flammable. Whereas a thicker, more lusher verge is far less likely to burn. It's in the same way as with the forestry issue.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, look, obviously we all agree that if we could use less chemicals, that's a bonus. And I think the best way to do it is community buy-in and get people to be responsible for their neck of the roads. I understand it'd be nice not to use them in parks, but I think before we make a decision on that, we need to say, well, does that mean we have to employ 2 more council employees and what the ramifications are before we vote on it? That's all. More information.
Thank you. Councillor Burgess, was you penning your pen up or no?
No. Now to go and retard growth before it can take off through spring. And lets us get a fighting chance to continue our mowing program through summer, so that we don't have the fire risk, the sightline risks. So our mowers are going. We have 2 hydro mowers that go full time all year round and try to get 2 laps of the every road in the valley throughout the year. So yes, we are mowing far more.
This whole area in more detail in in our law strategy, our land, air and water strategy that's sort of happening at the moment.
That will come to council for discussion in draft anyway, right?
Yeah,
Well-
but it'd be quite, you know, if we specifically take that into consideration and, you know, to think about Councillor Burgess's issue about bushfires, because, I mean, a year ago when I was in the UK, it was hotter there. It was over 30 degrees.
Is for a subdivision. The application is not for car parking associated with the use on the existing land. So fundamentally, you're dealing with matters that are outside the application. The consideration of a footpath is something which you can consider in the context of infrastructure supporting a subdivision within that area. The matter of car parking is a matter for council as a road authority, so I'm not talking as a planning authority here. It's not something which is considered as part of your development application. So if there's a concern, it may need to be considered by Infrastructure Services Department to consider the implications of that. But certainly, if you wanted to consider a footpath, it is relevant to frontage works associated with a lot in a residential area, noting that there is no footpath existing anywhere else.
I agree, yeah. But I think that when there's a lot of cars parked along there, it does drive people out along the road, and it's near a school, and it would be worth considering as the public amenity contribution for that to be resolved, if it's possible.
Do you think that's something that could be looked at, or and it doesn't connect? There'd be no other paths that connects up to, or
Well, it's
no?
not far from there to the sports centre and the
Right.
school. I
Yeah.
think the footpath goes up to the little laneway that goes down behind the sports centre, but I don't think it goes.
It doesn't extend
I don't
past
think
the
it
tennis
extends
courts.
past the tennis courts. That's
Yeah,
right.
okay.
It goes to the tennis courts.
Yeah.
But extending it just past that where the cars are parked and formalising that so that there's a safe place to go might be a good contribution to a public amenity, I guess.
and that would be just a gravel.
I don't think it needs, the main thing is moving the wheel stops back.
Yeah. Okay.
Just so that instead of cars
There's
being up against.
There's insufficient room to do that. So you're talking footpath in between the fence and the wheel stops?
Yes.
To bring cars back? No, they won't fit. Not wide enough.
I sort of measured it roughly, but I didn't measure it accurately.
Not wide enough.
Okay.
No, not to get a footpath in there.
And even what if we went to angle parking,
If we went to angled parking, yep.
which would be...
So as a road authority, council doesn't accept that that's a good long-term use.
No.
So it's been used in that way for a long time.
Yeah.
But it's a suboptimal condition for sure.
And would angled parking with a footpath behind improve that, or is that still suboptimal?
It may improve it, but the engineering work has not been done to demonstrate what would work and what those options would look like. How many spaces you'd fit, you'd lose spaces with it. Going to angled parking, you need to consider safety and design. There's more to it than just getting a ruler out and can it possibly fit. So that's the work hasn't been done as part of this application.
And acting as a planning authority, it's not triggered.
And it's not been triggered. So yeah, it's a.
Mayor,
And so the only thing is the contribution.
Yeah, or Matt, conditioning for a
Through
a
you, Mayor,
footpath?
the public open space contribution is a statutory contribution, so
Yeah.
it goes towards public open space account for the benefit of parks and gardens
Yeah.
in the Huon Valley, so that wouldn't be able to be used for the purpose of a footpath. You would need a condition on there to specifically require a footpath along the frontage of the subdivided lots. Accesses, barring accesses, yeah.
Yeah. But your first comment was that that's outside the the scope of this decision,
I said the car parking is outside the scope of the decision.
but the footpath isn't.
Footpath can be considered as part of a subdivision.
But not part of that being done out of that open space money there.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yes, councillor, one moment. No. Okay, yep, go for it.
Mayor, there is no evidence that this piece of land that they're looking at subdividing has ever been used for parking.
No.
So there's no way of linking parking to this application, in my view. The fact that the council has let them get away with parking poorly for many years is, I think, an issue that council could quite probably have a discussion with them about, but it is a separate discussion to that decision. That said, they are going to have to make an application to do something with that land later, to subdivide it or whatever they have to do, and maybe that's where we should be saying, you know, more relevant to that subdivision about paths and stuff like that in that broader planning aspect, because they have foreshadowed their subdividing. So I have two related questions. Yeah.
Could I just say, through you, Mayor, this is the application for subdivision.
But are they actually?
This will result in the subdivision.
This will result in a large chunk of land being palmed off, but is that going to then break it up into the smaller blocks that they're going to try to sell? I don't see that. It says something, it might be, but won't they have to make another application to?
No, through you, Mayor, they're creating two lots. One will be on a residential zoned lot, which will be able to be sold. One will be on a recreation zoned lot.
What will they be able to do with that block that once that is sold?
Anything which is permitted or allowable in the general residential zone.
And will they have to make a planning application to council to do that?
Make a planning application, but you wouldn't be dealing with matters of footpaths. You'll be dealing with the crossover will already be done, so you'll be assessing against the development standards and use and development standards of the scheme and the codes. So car parking for that particular site will be considered at the time.
Which could consider footpaths at that point?
No.
Right, okay. Oh, there you go. But I have two broader questions while we're there. It looks like there is some other vacant land around that site. So is any of this area going to be drawn up into a Signet SAP anyway, or is this too far out of the town centre to be included? That's sort of one question.
I'm not sure what the further vacant land is that you're referring to, but there's no intention at the moment for a SAP in this particular area.
Right, because it does look like there are there would be opportunities to increase the density around that whole area, just looking at the aerial map. But I'm assuming we're not going to do a SAP because that's more the town centre that we're talking about, isn't it? I think that's fair. But the other issue is the issue of the sewerage. There's a number of comments in there about needing to pump the sewage, I think, uphill to a main connection. What guarantee or what redress do other ratepayers in the area have if the sewage plant isn't functioning effectively? I'm assuming that's not or the pumping plant. I'm assuming that's not our responsibility as council. I'm assuming they would have to go to TasWater to remedy that.
Through you, Mayor, there may be some jurisdiction for council. We'd refer it to our environmental health area in relation to potential nuisance or public health nuisance to be reviewed, and that may be something which goes through to TasWater, but certainly if there are those issues, we can look at it.
But not at the engineering planning. We're just assuming they're going to build the right plant, and then if
correct.
It fails,
the engineering planning's done to TasWater satisfaction.
Yep, cool. Thank you.
Yes, councillor Campbell-Smith.
Thank you. Given this is an application just for a subdivision, to split that residential bit off, many of the issues raised by the representatives, I understand, are sort of not directly relevant because they'd need to be addressed by any future developer wishing to build on the land. But one of the representations, which was particularly detailed and covered all the issues, did point out that if the Bowls Club is then going to use this money to make a synthetic green, it will lead to the Bowls Club being used a lot more throughout the year, hence the 22 days or whatever it was that they said the bowls club was being used could extend out to 100 or something. So that does, I think, perhaps trigger us as council, even though we can't put it in here, to actually, you know, approach the bowls club and talk to them about this parking issue and see what alternatives can be made, because it's clearly not a satisfactory option, you know, for the longer term, either for the people using the bowls club or for the people other people trying to get past, or whether they're driving or walking. And same as Councillor Jessup, the sewage issue does sound a bit of a problem, particularly since it looks like the fall of the land, even though it's very slight, it does look like everything's got to be pumped back up to that main. I don't think the sewer is an issue at the moment, but yeah, if it is something that needs to be checked out by environmental health, I think.
Councillor Campbell-Smith, I'd just like to say that whilst it's been deemed as out of the scope, given that this is a subdivision application and the use rights issue, etc., council officers have spent months attempting to have this conversation with the developer about the inadequacy of parking and access to the site. And it'd be remiss not to mention that, because they've really tried hard to assist on this. Ultimately, that hasn't been accepted, and we've gone down the path of, you know, you're out of scope, you're out of jurisdiction. So we're here tonight just looking at the subdivision as it stands.
Just to clarify, you're saying the bowls club wasn't helpful, or didn't want?
Council officers have identified this parking has been a problem.
Yeah.
It's been a discussion with infrastructure, with planning, with the developer. I've met with the developer myself about this parking issue. So we've made every endeavour to try to resolve that, and that's been unsuccessful because it's out of the scope of the what we could consider with subdivision. So we've been trying to forecast these problems and try to resolve it up front. So those attempts have already been made. I just wanted to point out to you that staff haven't been blind to it.
No doubt. But could we, as a road authority, then we do have the power, presumably, to turn around and say you can't park there, or can we not do that because it's a long existing use right?
The road authority has that power to do so. Yes.
Right. Okay. That's something to think about.
Yes, Councillor Gibson.
I was just wondering, in the condition 11, which is all about the crossovers for each lot. I mean, the crossover for the bowls club itself is essentially the whole width of the property. I don't know whether that's, you know.
I think it would follow that they would create an easement, a right of access over the one driveway through to lot 2 at the back, and so the single access would become the access for both lots.
It says, you know, it says that there shouldn't. That we have to have crossovers to each lot separately. To the 2 lots.
Can you clarify that, Mark?
Yeah. So through you, Mayor, the provision is in relation to a crossover to each lots. They may be able to respond by saying that there's an easement over one of the lots, which will effectively create that crossover. But at the moment, each lot needs to have its own frontage and access. Yes. It's not relying on what is currently existing. So both lots will have a conforming crossover.
So can we amend this to include the provision of a footpath across the frontage? Is there?
If that's the way that council wants to go.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't be happy to support that. I think it virtually puts we're charging them a lot already and putting a lot of conditions on it, and you're virtually getting to a point where they won't go through with it, and you'll lose your bowls club.
Okay, so what would you like to do, Councillor?
I think we should test it with other councillors. I'm happy to put an amendment that a gravel footpath be included as a part of the. I don't think it's a big cost. I think it's you know, and it I think it would make a big difference to safety and amenity in the area.
We would be requiring a footpath built in accordance with the Tasmanian standard drawings, so it'd be a concrete footpath meeting spec in that location.
Well, let's put that in and see what people say. I mean, I appreciate
So you're moving,
Councillor O'Neill's point of view, but I mean, it's always a balance between safety and with the school there and lots of cars parked. Yeah.
okay, so you are moving
Just an amendment, a condition 19 that a footpath be included.
okay,
Across.
do we have a seconder for that?
Could I ask a question on that, if I may, just a clarification? So, can you put in it either a footpath or you park elsewhere?
There is no solution to that.
No.
No. So,
Sorry, how does a footpath fix the parking? So I'm being a bit dense here.
So,
It doesn't.
well, it does. It makes a big difference because at the moment, anybody going past the cars down Louisa Street basically has to go around onto the road,
Right.
behind the cars that are potentially backing out. So it's a risk, it's a danger. I mean,
can you explain to me, Paul, where do they walk if they're walking before they get to there? What are they walking on? There isn't a path? Or are they walking
there's a
on?
verge.
There's a verge,
Yeah.
okay, right. But there's no footpath prior to coming to the front of the cars?
Well, I guess we could look, council could look at connecting that bit of footpath on in the future to make it continuous, but at the moment, obviously, we can only prescribe a footpath for the frontage of the property. We can't say they can't go past the tennis courts and all over the place. So.
Okay.
But I guess just talking to that, well, we should have a seconder first, I guess, if there is any.
Yes, is there a seconder to councillor Gibson's amendment to the adding a footpath? Sorry.
I'll second it just so that we can discuss it.
Mayor, Councillor Campbell-Smith seconded the motion.
So you can't, because, yeah.
So at the moment, sorry, before I even think about seconding, so at the moment, looking at that second photograph, are we saying that the cars are basically parking between that fence? So they're illegally parking. They're parking over a pavement.
On the verge.
No, well, no, there's a pavement there.
The curb.
No, that looks like a path to me on that photo. Going down. So a car would, if a car was parking nose up against that fence, it would be on the lawn and on the footpath.
Yep.
Yes.
And that's illegal, isn't it? To park on a footpath.
Correct. And it's been tolerated for years.
Okay, so if there's a public health risk that Councillor Gibson wants to raise, somebody can get along there with a little book and put some little things under their windscreens and teach them not to park there. The issue though is what's the alternative? And it looks like there's space between their clubhouse and the street down the side, whatever street that's called. So it sounds like they have got opportunities to create parking if they want to. So what's that space there between the clubhouse on the top photo and that side street? So won't lot 2 just come off the main road a bit further down?
As I said before, council staff have attempted to address this issue of parking, and the developer has chosen not to do that.
So I think I'm just not comfortable that we're holding up the subdivision based on a power that we already have that we're clearly not exercising. So if parking is an issue, we can find those people who park there. We won't be popular, but that may motivate the Bowls Club to find some alternative parking ideas.
Path, and
just avoid having any conversation about diagonal parking, or should we first have a conversation on diagonal parking before building a new footpath?
Well, we're acting as a planning authority, so we've got very few controls. One of the controls we have is that we can ask for a footpath. At the moment, the footpath, because you're not actually meant to park on the verge, there's a problem with the existing footpath because cars are over it and also backing, backing out of that area where pedestrians are walking. So it's much safer and better to have the pedestrians the other side of the verge, in my opinion. You see what I mean? So that as cars come in, they're not running over pedestrians.
I think I'd just say, and apologies for my lack of clarity before, because I did think the footpath ended before there. There is a footpath clearly in the photos in there, so there is a footpath across there that's established at the moment. I'll just go back to the road authority does not accept that this is an acceptable solution, nor does the road authority think that we can make an acceptable solution in that location for car parking. So we've already established that it's not a matter that we can really consider as part of this subdivision application, but the road authority following this, and we have been attempting to solve the parking through an amiable approach with the developer. So following whatever the decision is tonight on the subdivision, the road authority will need to be approaching the owners of that land and clarifying issues of parking as they exist now, as well as they could exist in the future. Yep. Two separate matters. I don't think that changing around footpathing, or we're certainly not going to put angled parking strips across there. It's inappropriate for parking in that location unless it was fully re-engineered, done properly, and we've already attempted this and have reached the point where we're just pushing ahead under the existing use right.
Yes, Councillor
Thank you
Burgess.
for the clarification.
Thank you.
Acting
Yes,
General
Councillor
Manager.
Burgess.
Yeah, my question is that it's going to be a matter for the road authority to look at it at a later date. If it doesn't go in this document here, are they bound to actually talk to you, or wouldn't it be the best place to put it that parking will be looked at as one of the conditions and get it in this document?
I'll ask the director if there's any way that we can put a hook in, but I don't.
Through you, Mayor, it's a matter outside of the subdivision.
Yeah.
The subdivision is the creation of two lots. It is not the determination of car parking outside the subdivision which supports the use.
So, from what I can see, is that there is a footpath there. Let's try and work with the developer on taking those cars from there and what else we can do to help them with that without having to build another walking area, if there's already one there. Is that sort of the solution that you...
Yeah, correct. I mean, the road authority is a whole separate head of power, and I've heard enough here tonight that councillors have that interest in us dealing with a problem that's been long-standing accepted. So the road authority was going to do that anyway. We'll do that in haste, and we do have options. Like council has a cash in lieu of car parking contribution policy that was also discussed with the developer. So there's opportunities that we've got to have this conversation. We want to see a thriving bowls club. We do not want to see that at the cost of public safety right beside a primary school.
Yes, Councillor.
Just quickly, we have in the past where we've had this sort of situation where we've wanted to deal with things that are actually outside our power as a planning authority, and we've sent a letter to them saying, so we could agree in this that we would send a letter to say that we will be, council has expressed a desire to deal with this.
Does that have to go into this, though?
It just means it's in a resolution, so it has to be...
But it is outside.
Through you, Mayor, it just might be coming from the planning authority.
Yeah, okay.
It's only a suggestion.
It would be a paragraph C.
It would be a paragraph C.
Yeah, it's not a permit condition, it's just it's a separate
Yeah.
paragraph C.
All right. So, in that paragraph C, you would like, councillor?
Cameron Smith?
Yep.
Yep.
I was waiting for you to get your page and then I was going to...
Paragraph C of the recommendations. Yeah, absolutely, that we just add that council will write to them stating our intention as a road authority to, address with them the road, the parking on the verge issue in the, as soon as possible time frame or something of that nature. I'm sure Matt can come up with something.
Very fast.
Yeah.
Typing very fast at the moment. Yep. So, do you accept that part C, councillor O'Neill? Has he got it?
I'd like to vote on that separately, Mayor, if we can, as an amendment, because I don't want to tell the council staff how to suck eggs, because it sounds like they've been sucking eggs pretty hard to get the parking. So why do we think that us sending a letter, given last time that we did it, the developer didn't even have the courtesy to respond to us? So, yeah, look, I trust Lockie and his, the acting general manager and his staff to prosecute this. Hopefully the Bowls Club is listening to this and they're hearing that the council is tired of them pushing the envelope, and it's time that they grew up and did some work on fixing the problem for the community.
Okay.
And that's my, I'm pretty blunt on that, but yeah.
Councillor O'Neill?
So we're not changing any of the recommendations, just going to vote on...
On the...
Yeah, what's the amendment though?
No, you don't have to.
Whether councillor O'Neill would accept that amendment as the mover or not, I guess.
Yeah.
I accept the amendment if it just means that we're going to talk about it, but we're not enforcing anything at this stage. Is that what we're saying?
Writing a letter.
Yep. So I'm happy to write a letter and point out the obvious.
So what's the wording there you have?
Through you, Mayor, the wording I have is council will write to the developer stating our intention as a road authority to address with them the car parking on the road verge in a suitable time frame.
Yeah, but for the sake of getting it through, I'll accept that. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any... Do you want to close on that?
Oh, look, I realise that it's a difficult... That there are valid issues of parking, but I'll just go back to this club's trying to improve its situation, and the Bowls Club in Hillenville is in a similar situation, and we're talking about actually moving them somewhere else and doing that. So if it's really that bad, can we move that club somewhere else and build them a new club room? So I just think we should be very mindful this club's working hard to fix their own situation.
Thank you, councillor O'Neill. All right. So you've accepted that we've added a C to send a letter. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors except Councillor Armstrong, and yes. Thank you. The motion's passed. Good conversation, guys. Bye-bye. Thank you, Councillor Armstrong, for that lengthy wait then, but yeah, that's good. Okay, so I'm now up to agenda number 10.017/23, report under section 35F of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 on the representations received by the Planning Authority following exhibition of the draft Yuan Valley Local Provision Scheduled, LPS HUO TPS. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion, please? Yes, Councillor Campbell-Smith. A seconder? Councillor Gibson. Councillor Campbell-Smith, do you wish to speak to this?
Only briefly, I think the work that ERA consultants have done to look at these areas in Garden Island Creek and Palvarata is very good. So I commend the motion.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments there? Councillor, who are you? You're Jessup.
Yep, I'll move this for you, Mayor. There we go.
Yep.
Look, I think we all received an email which is from the 180 Middle Road people, which does question for me the quality of the advice that we're receiving. It is not the first time that I've sat in a TPC commission and found that ERA have not fully researched their advice to us. Let me just make that statement. So this representative has said, it states, and this is on 49031-1, does not contain any residential use. Their comment is there is an approved building permit in place and construction is underway. So that would suggest that there is probably a residential use if we want to be pedantic about it. The other more interesting and more nuanced discussion is that there is currently forest practices plans in place, and I can only take it on what this person has said, but I think Director Grimsey has actually confirmed, at least on one block, there's a forest practices plan that allows for the clearing of 4 hectares, which will leave the property about 25% bush, and that will be used for firewood and clearing the land. So based on the fact that there's a forest practices plan in place would suggest that there are no threatened species, because they wouldn't have got the forest practices plan if there were threatened species. Because forest practices plans are written by qualified people and approved by the Forest Practices Commission, which is a statutory body which we believe are honourable people and do the right thing and are not dishonest. So moving on from that, they also say that their neighbour's block has a forest practices plan on it. So I suppose, and this is a sort of question back to the director, I suppose, is given that comment, does it change the advice? And it looks like, just on the email that you sent us, Matt, it looks like there's a chunk of landscape conservation which is predominantly 20298-1 and 238240-1. Now, is that where the other forest practices plan is? So has that been cleared? Is that commercial forestry? And then it looks like there's a bit of rural up there and a bit of rural below and a bit of rural living, the lighter pink. Is that's my reading of that picture you sent us, that one there? So I'm assuming that's rural living there, that's rural, and that's landscape conservation.
Through you, Mayor, I did respond. I'm not sure that went to all councillors now you've just said that.
Oopsie.
I haven't seen it. No, I don't know what he's talking about.
Would you? Okay. My apologies, fellow councillors. I can forward that to you. So yesterday, when I was reviewing this material, I did ask Matt a specific question about what that representative had said. I'm sorry that you're all looking more vague than normal. But it is, look, and these are complicated land use questions. So my question was basically that the landholder had come across and said those couple of things. The directors I think interesting advice was a little bit on the history, that it was environmental living that went to landscape conservation, and we know that's been just contested and confusing. Generally, the land with forest practices plans is recommended to be rural. However, if the subject title is zoned rural, then the lots will be spot zoned, but not particularly nastily spot zoned. I think the TPC has allowed a level of that. But I think if there's a forest practices on the neighbour's property as well, that should flip into rural as well, because the general principle is if you've got an active forest practices plan on the title, it's classed as productive land, and I know that's a contentious description, Jenny. I'll accept that, but so that would suggest that it would no longer be spot zoned and rural would be more appropriate, and that seems to be what the people want. But I don't think the comment, I suppose, is I don't think we can rely on ERA's advice, because they clearly haven't done the depth of analysis of that person's block.
So you're at the end of that.
I'm asking for Matt's advice, I suppose, and if I'm being a bit vague, I suppose what I would be asking that block actually be left as rural in the advice because of the forest practices plan, which is the overarching principle that they're.
What is it currently being suggested?
It's currently been suggested to LCZ, I think, for that, because it's in that broader cluster.
I just sent an email around.
Yeah, I'll just forward it to you.
I just realised as Councillor Jessup was speaking that it hadn't been sent to all councillors last night, so when I replied to it first thing this morning, I overlooked sending it to all councillors, so I apologise for that.
Mayor,
Yes.
given just a point of order, perhaps. I mean, this happened once before, where we had a very complicated amendment from Councillor Jessup that we didn't have time to address. We didn't have time to look at during the meeting properly, and we ended up voting on it, although I felt very uncomfortable about the fact that we were looking at a complicated amendment, not in detail, without the sufficient director's advice that we ought to have on a planning matter. And this would be another one of those where we can't make a decision on this evidence when we haven't had a chance to look at it. So I don't think we can accept it.
We do have amendments on lots of different things, though.
But not when it's as complex as this, and we don't even know which one's been talked about on this map. It would take a good half an hour to sit and read all this detail that's coming through.
It's only a 2-page email.
Yeah. So, through to you, Director.
Through you, Mayor, the issue is we do not have information on the adjoining lot as to
Microphone.
which
Microphone.
I think I turned it off instead of on.
You did.
The issue is that we don't have information as to which adjoining lot apparently has a forest practices plan on it. The landscape conservation zone, which is proposed, will not affect the applying the forest practices plan that is in action. Any work that's done under a forest practices plan is exempt under the state planning provisions, so under the Tasmanian planning scheme. It's a matter for the council whether or not you wish to look at other zoning. The issue that you have is you have about 4 or 5 properties which are landscape conservation. They have never been environmental living. They were rural in the previous planning scheme, and having been assessed in accordance with the guidelines was determined, and I believe appropriately, to be landscape conservation.
Okay, so my 2 points of contention there is I don't think RA has done their full analysis on it. But the other point, a technical point under Direction 34, I don't think in the recommendation title 49031/1 has actually been mentioned. So even though in the top part of the Planning Authority response we say we're here to assess that block, if you go down to the recommended action, I can't find that there, and I've double checked that. So in actual fact, we're we're not being asked to make a recommendation on that because it's not included in the in the document that I can see. Can you see it or not, Paul? I can't.
Through Mayor, that means no change to the zoning which is currently proposed.
Right. That's not explicit though, is it? So there's changes and changes. Yeah, okay.
May I ask a question of Councillor Jessup? If the FPP that's on that land is not affected by a change of zone, by being zoned LCZ, what is your problem with it being LCZ?
Yeah, look, that's a valid point, and I think given that building has started, that would assume that under the current zoning there is
and it's not LCZ yet
been,
anyhow, so it won't be for another year.
Well, but it's clearly been signed off if they're starting to build, hopefully.
Yep.
Yeah.
So look, I do concede it probably isn't going to make a lot of difference for how that person is using that land because there won't be many trees left on it when they're finished their forest practices in, which is an unfortunate consequence of how people are responding to LCZ, unfortunately.
But they're doing that now under the current
exactly right.
scheme.
So, okay.
So I suppose I'm raising the point, Mayor, that I don't think the advice is fully correct.
Right.
But is it material for that landholder? Probably not, but they will ultimately have the opportunity to take this to the Planning Commission, and noting that there's been some discussion at council, they can hopefully go and talk to their neighbours who have a forest practices plan and show it to the TPC, and they'll probably get put into rural anyway.
Thank you. Okay, so no changes then? You're not proposing any?
I was.
No.
I think I was happy with the rest of it from what I can see.
Okay. Okay. Would you like to close, Councillor Smith?
No, that's fine.
Okay. If we've no further, we'll just, I'll move that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors. The motion is carried. I advise that the council is no longer acting as a planning authority as at 11, general reports. As listed, are there any councillors tabling their activities tonight? Would anyone like to speak to their, to those tonight? No? Okay, thank you. 11.010/23. Do I have a councillor to move a motion that the general reports and minutes for the period 1 to 30th September 2023 be received and noted? Councillor Jessup and seconded Councillor Thorpe. Do you wish to speak to any of that, Councillor Jessup?
Mayor, I just note that there's obviously been a lot of meetings and activities, and it just underlies the amount of work that councillors and staff do outside of just how many other meetings that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. So no other, yes, Councillor Camsby?
Just a couple of comments stroke questions. A little bit concerned about the amount of money we're spending on supporting tourism, and I know it was really essential following on from the impacts of COVID, and it clearly was a sort of strategic choice at that time. But now, we're spending a lot of work on the Huon Valley TAS website, for instance, when their own, council's own website is in bad need of renovation and upgrade. And I hope when we start looking at our new environmental development strategy that we can think a bit more broadly, especially since I went along to the Willie Smith's the AGM of the Huon Valley Tourism Network at Willie Smith's, and it was packed. There were a lot of people there. There's obviously, quite a bit of money in the room, and people with interest who, as a group could be doing this sort of thing for themselves now, with just council's help with, you know, promotions and stuff like that generally, in the same way that we might support other things. But I don't think they need, personally, I don't think they need, you know, the sort of help that we're giving them at the moment, including that we've spent money on PR and media advice on the behalf of tourism, etc. So it's a comment really that I think we could perhaps consider redirecting that money and that effort into other, you know, perhaps more sort of regenerative and resilient type activities. And the other question was, which are the 2 primary schools that are currently involved in the Heartland Food Hub project? Because it's always a worry to me that the state schools sometimes don't have the manpower to take on these projects. So I'd just like to find out, you know, what's going on there.
I'll take that on notice, Mayor. I just don't have access to my notes.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any other questions? No? All right. Well, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all, councillors. The motion is carried. 12 councillor workshops. We only had the one, and it was, well, we had the one on the 18th of October, and that was to do our councillor priorities. And then this Tuesday, yesterday, I forgot what day it is, we had the Premier down, and there was a cabinet meeting held, and then we had a very productive talk with the ministers concerning our priorities and where we were heading. And it, of all accounts, it went really well, and they thought that all the work that had been done on council with our community vision, our strategic planning, was all something that was showing why we had these priorities. So they were very impressed with that. So well done, everyone. 13, councillor questions. 13.1, questions taken on notice. There was 2 questions taken on notice from September's meeting, and they're on our website. They've been answered. Okay. 13.2, questions given on notice. There was none tonight. 13.3, questions without notice. Councillors, are there any questions without notice? Yes, Councillor Campbell-Smith.
I did send one in, so it probably was on, I don't know whether that counted on notice or not. So if I may...
Yeah, you may.
I've had a bit of a conversation actually with Jess about it, but I'll read the question out anyhow, even though I partially know the answer at this stage. Yeah. In May 27, Council joined the Cities Power Partnership, and at its January 2018 meeting pledged to support the uptake of electric vehicles and roll out energy efficient street lighting across the municipality. We now have 1 EV council vehicle, and there are 3 council installed charging stations in the municipality. Also in 2017, LGAT commissioned Ironbark Sustainability to review the business case for councils in the southern region to replace streetlights with LEDs. Council decided to replace them as they failed owing to the high upfront capital cost of replacement. And in the climate change report to the February 2023 meeting, it was noted this decision was reviewed again in 2021, and we reinforced that decision to only replace lights as they failed. And it was noted that almost 50% of the streetlights had already been changed over to LEDs. So my questions are, given we're budgeted in $163,000 this year for electricity just for streetlights, could we reduce that bill if we converted the remaining streetlights to LEDs? And what would be that cost and the payback period? And could we get any help from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, which has helped other councils with that transition? And secondly, LDV released an electric ute in Australia this year and plans to release a 4-wheel drive version next year. That ute retails at around 92k compared to the Ford Ranger, which ranges from 35 to 86k, and I don't know which model we purchase, but it would be cheaper to operate. And I just wondered, have we considered that LDV ute when making fleet decisions this year? And if so, how does it compare with our current purchases, taking purchasing and operating costs into consideration? So my voice is bad.
Yeah, one thing I will say is what happens, Director or Acting General Manager, on the on when you go to resell on a vehicle when they go to auction, being not an like a well-known brand ute, we possibly
It's a
would.
consideration, for sure. Yep. Look, we will, thank you for sending the question in beforehand. Obviously, the street lighting one has multifacets and is complex, so we'll give you we've got a written response to give you for both of them, but for the purpose of now, the capital cost of doing a before end-of-life replacement on the LED street lights far outweighs the cost savings from the energy reductions achieved through LEDs, and that's why the position has consistently been replace them at end of life. We are heading to LED anyway, and we've significantly drawn down on that number of, increased the number of LEDs to well above 50% now anyway. So over the next 5 years, I think it's estimated that we'll have them fully replaced at the least possible cost without paying a capital replacement value that was around $370,000 to save about $50,000 a year. So we'll put all those numbers into the paper. But this is just the reality of, yes, it's a good thing, we want to save energy, but we have to look at the life cycle cost of this thing and realise that over a natural progression anyway, we'll get those savings and we'll get the climate and emission benefits, but we'll do it at the least cost to the community. So that's the street lighting one, but we'll give you a long form answer on it anyway.
I just wondered if the street light replacement came out of the capital budget as opposed to the operating budget, and whether that made any difference at all, the replacement.
It would, but it's still something we're paying for, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. In terms of the use, the simple answer is we're looking at electric vehicles, not just utes, hybrid trucks, electric. We recently trialled an electric zero-turn mower that amazed the team. So I think we'll be seeing, again, just like streetlights, a natural progression of more of these alternative fuels, whether they're just electric or hydrogen or God knows what. We are going to see a natural progression out of this space. We didn't consider the LDV T60E electric ute. It's the first one in Australia. We used State Treasury's fleet procurement list. That ute is not on that list at the moment. To get on that list, the State Treasury assesses them for their, are they a suitable vehicle to be purchased by government fleet in Tasmania. That's what we purchased from. So it hasn't been worth our while to do the cost-benefit analysis of it, but I'm very confident that if we did test that at the moment, that the life cycle cost of an LDV, including the probable resale of it, would be higher than an equivalent Ranger in today's terms. But I'm equally confident that given we hold a Ranger for 4 years, 150,000 kilometres, that we're probably seeing the last of the internal combustion engine vehicles that we will put through council, and in that period of time we'll see more and more of these viable alternatives, and hopefully at that point they meet the range requirements, they meet the towing requirements, they meet our basic service requirements, because at the end of the day a ute is a tool, and our utes work pretty hard in a rural area.
I'll be interested in the 0 to 100 speed of the zero-turn mower.
It did 40 kilometres an hour in its travel mode. I'm not joking. It's actually a work health and safety hazard how fast it will go.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, shit.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So, no other questions without notice? Yes, Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question through you to our acting GM. In Signet in Frederick Street, there's a footpath that goes to nowhere. Are there any plans to make that go somewhere anytime soon?
It's not budgeted for at the moment, but it will be coming through as a budget position as part of our capital works program. So the footpath to nowhere has been done as a developer contribution.
Right.
So they've done a subdivision, and just like we were talking earlier, a footpath in that case did go in.
Yep.
So yes, it's a footpath to nowhere at the moment, but it means council doesn't have to do that entire frontage, and we've set that footpath in so that we can also accommodate some road widening and just clean up that area generally that is outside.
032/23 until the March meeting. And I move that we defer motion 15.03223 until the March meeting.
Do I have a
Thank you.
seconder for that? Councillor Gibson, and that's passed, or no? We need to vote?
You need to vote
Yep,
on it, no
okay.
discussion.
All right, no discussion. All those in favour? That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Jessup. Agenda number 15.035/23, Local Government Association of Tasmania, General Meeting Motions. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Gibson, and a seconder. Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Gibson, do you wish to speak to these?
I entirely agree with the recommendation that we support all of them.
Yep.
I did have a question because we, and I can't remember it right at the moment, but we put in something to LGAT. Did that end up getting? I mean, obviously this is the time when they vote. I guess we don't get to vote on our own motions, but
Yes,
did the
we all vote.
Huron Valley ones go in?
Through you, Mayor, whilst I was away at the time, the motion was referred to LGAT. It needs some further information and work provided to it, and it was too late for the November meeting.
I see.
So the advice, and it's in the council resolutions update, the advice is that it would go to the March
Meeting.
2024 meeting.
Yep.
Thank you.
And just on that, Mayor, I'll be circulating some information to councils to make sure that the supporting information is correct.
Good. Yeah, I don't really have much to add on these motions, but I thought that they sounded all very good and constructive.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that one? Okay, you want to close, Councillor Gibson?
No, thanks, Mayor, that's fine.
Okay, all right. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 15.036/23, Draft 22-23 Annual Report. I refer councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Canberra-Smith. Do you wish to speak to this, Councillor Armstrong? Do I have any other comments? Yes, statements? Yeah, questions?
Yeah, hi. There was a... Sorry. Losing the plot. Yeah, there were a couple of typos and things that I picked up, or slight errors, in particular in the... and I can just put them in a submission, in particular in the FGEs for under community development. There's quite a few repeats with slightly different numbers, and I think it was just a typo error that they copied and pasted something and didn't delete the old ones. But the question I particularly had that I think is worth looking at is where we've got our employment figures from, because there's no reference for it, whereas there is for the population, etc. It says the 2021 census, because I don't understand some of the employment figures. They seem to be contrary to what we have in profile.ed for 2021/2022, for instance, it says 16.7% for aquaculture, whereas the figure in profile.id is 12.9. I think agriculture we've got 11%, and I think it's actually 8.8%. We've got preschool and school education for 4%, whereas in the table that I've got from profile.id it's 7.3%. So it's just whether those figures could please be checked and the references, where that reference has come from.
Okay, can we take that one?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Do I have any others? Any other? Yes, Councillor Gibson?
I guess on that, what Councillor Cammersmith has pointed out about employment, I would quite like to see a tourism, a percentage that's employed in tourism and also in the arts, because it's easy to sort of put together a whole lot of figures around agriculture, but it's equally valid, I think, to put a whole lot of employment around tourism and also the arts. And without putting them in the list, it sort of looks like they're not there, I guess.
Is that sort of something that we should have done?
We should. I've said it a few times,
Oh,
and
okay.
and we keep coming up with these same figures,
Right.
same breakdown. But I'd prefer to see a breakdown that was more representative of where people are actually being employed.
That's actually a really good point, because social care and elder care is
quite
fast increasing and is almost, it will soon be the biggest employer in the municipality.
Yep.
Can we take that? Yep. Can we take that one on notice as well?
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
No problems. Thank you. Do I have any others? No. Councillor Armstrong, do you want to close?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I haven't got a lot to say about it. I mean, I agree the figures are always going to be a little bit unpredictable, I suppose, but how many times do you cross groups? And some of, I was going to say something. So some of the like the planning and the tourism and whatnot, they could already be workers that are represented somewhere else that go into the tourism industry to work. So it's difficult to get a thorough breakdown of everything, but I'm happy to go, with other people's ideas and options.
Yep.
But it could be the same people just across the board in different industries being represented.
Thank you.
Mayor.
No problems. Thank you. All right. Well, if there's no more, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Motion. That's all, councillors. The motion is carried. Agenda number 15.037/23, consent to development outside the area of the building envelope applicable to 18 Bull Oak Way, Grove, CT 181367-4. I actually refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move a motion? Councillor Gibson. Seconder. Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Gibson, do you wish to speak to this motion?
This looks to be a reasonable relaxation of that envelope. Looking at the diagram, it seemed that the transpiration trenches and whatever are still outside the protected vegetation zone. There didn't seem to be any information about what was actually growing where they're proposed. So I'd be interested to know if. Sorry.
Mayor, this is the dwelling and outbuilding. 15.037.
Oh, sorry. I'm wrong one. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Why aren't we doing this as a planning authority? Is this not a planning
Because
issue?
it's
Through you, Mayor, this is not a planning authority. The covenant has been made with the Huon Valley Council, not the council as a planning authority. It's a...
Okay, yes, councillor?
That's really puzzling because in one of the ones we've passed today, there's a covenant clause in there, isn't there? So how would we have set up a covenant not as a planning authority? Sorry, just...
Through you, Mayor, it was established by council acting as a planning authority, but ultimately the covenant is with the Huon Valley Council as a corporate body, as opposed to a Part 5 agreement, which is council as a planning authority.
Technical. Yes. Councillor Gibson, did you want to refer to this one or?
No.
No? Okay,
Because
so you've got no problem with this one then?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay, so do you want to close?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I think
councillor,
it's-
yes?
Well, has Councillor Gibson put
He
his
is
hand-
actually put his hand up for 15.037-23.
Oh, he has? Okay.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the one I read out.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Well, I have a concern about it. I don't know why we would set building envelopes and then allow development outside them. Presumably I mean, the next one we're going to look at seems okay. But presumably the envelopes were mapped for a good reason. And as you know, this subdivision worries me a little bit anyway, owing to its bushfire risk, very steep roads, and likely issues with erosion and stormwater. But I note that number 62, the next one we're going to be looking at, whose wastewater system we're reviewing, they've made a really significant effort to keep their building footprint exactly within the building envelope. And their request for the wastewater system outside seems quite reasonable. They've also taken extra efforts with bushfire management, etc. But whereas this one, they just don't seem to have made any effort to actually keep the building footprint within the building envelope, and so I'm not quite sure why we would set those envelopes and then just say, yeah, fine, you can build it outside them.
Might go
Maybe I'm
through
being
to you,
picky.
Director.
Through you, Mayor, it's a correct statement. Just trying to remember the specific history with this because it was a very complicated subdivision. Certainly there were building envelopes that were originally shown on the subdivision plan, so they were ones that were adopted by council at the time. The main considerations as referred to in the report is the context of the matters of bushfire hazard and protection of specific vegetation. So that was done in 2015. We have an assessment now which looks at the current standards, and the report has basically determined that it doesn't impact on either of those matters. But the principle is correct. The building area was provided for a reason at the time. Yeah.
Okay, do I have any other questions on this agenda number?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but in this one, the residence is actually moved quite a lot closer to the road than the envelope. Is that correct? And the vegetation that's to be protected is to the south. Is that correct? It is quite difficult. The other one was clearer.
And through your Mayor, it is closer to the road.
And the protected vegetation's to the back of those lots.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, any other comments or questions on that?
Just one, thank you, Mayor. Yes. I'm very confused with the whole scenario, to be perfectly frank. I don't know why we have covenants if we're allowing driveways through them, so why not just get rid of it altogether? Like, what's the point of having it if we're not really using it as its intended purpose?
Through you, Mayor, the intended purpose is effectively that they can't have development outside the building envelope except with consent or permission of the council. So in any given circumstance, they have a right under that covenant to come back to council and say, in these circumstances, we believe that the matters identified for the purpose of the building envelope, which is the vegetation protection and bushfire, are not impacted.
So it makes them come back.
Right, so would that be the same rules for everybody that was in that situation?
Through you, Mayor, that's what the covenant provides for.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other?
No.
No? Yes?
Sorry, so under the covenant, the wastewater should be within the building envelope. That's how the envelope works.
Through you, Mayor, we're dealing with the dwelling and the outbuilding.
Oh, only so not the wastewater part.
Yeah,
of it. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So we're dealing with 18 Bull Oak Way.
Oh, we're dealing with the first one still.
Yeah.
So the second one looks really interesting.
So, Councillor Gibson, do you want to close?
No, thanks, Mayor.
Okay. All those in favour of this motion, please raise your hand. Put your hands up for me, please. That's Councillor Thorpe, Armstrong, Jessup, Burgess, O'Neill, Gibson and Doyle. And against is Councillor Campbell-Smith. Thank you. Agenda number 15.038/23, consent to development outside the area of the building envelope application to 62 Bull Oak Way, Grove, CT 181367/9. I refer the councillors to the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Gibson, seconder. Councillor Campbell-Smith. Do you wish to speak to this one, Councillor?
Well, this is the one I was speaking on before. Yeah, it seems to me that it's, I mean, if you look at the amount of land being used for this wastewater treatment, there's absolutely no way that would ever fit into the envelope at all. And I mean, I'm just going off, I haven't actually visited the site, but I'm going off the map. It seems to be still well clear of the covenant and vegetation. So in that light, I think it's sticking to the principles of why we have these covenants here, and I'm fairly comfortable with that.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions or comments on this one? Yes, Councillor Campbell-Smith?
Yeah, and this one seems altogether more reasonable because there's no actual buildings outside the envelope, and they said it's just sprinklers and a few things like that that will actually be, so that's not going to increase any bushfire risk or anything of that nature. So.
Yeah. Thank you. No others? Councillor Gibson, you wish to close?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 16.018/23, financial report. I refer the councillors to the recommendation. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Armstrong, a seconder. Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to this report? Okay. Do I have any other questions? No? Okay. Do you wish to close then? Okay. Well, I'll put that motion forward. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. I was going to say, you was letting Ray off. Yeah, just, yep. Do you wish to-
Not bad for acting. We're all acting.
Okay. It's up to the councillors now to decide on. We have 2 councillors that sit on these committees, and we have to decide whether that is a conflict of interest for them to be voting on anything to do with that committee. And that, so we have Councillor Armstrong on Pelverada and Councillor Cammersmith on Mountain River. Hall Committee, sorry, yep. So before I go on to agenda item there, sorry, we need to, and Councillor Burgess.
Yeah.
I'm on the committee somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay,
I saw your name
I'm on
somewhere.
the Senate, I'm on the Houston
Forest Workers one, okay,
That's it, yeah.
committee.
which is, which is still a council committee. Okay, so we have to decide whether they have a conflict of interest, is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mayor. The principle is simply a councillor voting on their own appointment to a committee of council.
Yeah, that sounds dodgy.
It does, doesn't it?
Have they not already been voted?
Through you, the appointment is being made by the council tonight.
Yep.
That's a point of clarification is if we determine that it is a conflict of interest, do we have a quorum to pass the recommendation
What if we
with
were
three?
all on one?
If 3 councillors are...
We'd have to break up the motion.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
yeah, of course we would, yeah.
No.
We still have 4,
No,
we still have 4 candidates.
no, we still have a quorum. So I believe that,
It's only for a voluntary position.
I think if 3 of you walk out, what's that?
That's all right, I don't mind.
yeah, we're right,
I don't mind having a loo break.
yeah. I just think to keep it clean,
I'm happy to leave again.
yep, yep.
We haven't finished washing up.
Secretary.
So you can fill out forms for Sandy for them, please.
I just got bullied into being the secretary, but anyways.
Here you go. Deb, I've got one here, one on your mats.
Thanks, love.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Agenda number 18.double.
Or splashbacks and things, I'd have thought it ought to be category 3 to make it a bit cheaper to hire.
I think that at the moment we're referring to, maybe that's a question we can ask. Yes, yes, if that's okay. Yep. Okay. Councillor Jessup, do you wish to close?
No, may I commend the motion to my fellow councillors?
Thank you. All those in favour of that motion, please raise your hand. That's all councillors, and the motion is carried. Agenda number 18.007/23, lease of public land, Port Ewan Sports Centre mezzanine level. I refer the councillors to the recommendation of this report. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Cammersmith and Councillor Burgess, seconded. Councillor Cammersmith, do you wish to speak?
No, I just think it's, well, just to say, I think it's great that somebody's put their hand up to offer another service, and let's go for it.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other comment on this one? No? No? Okay. Oh, yes, Councillor Armstrong?
Sorry, I have a question, Mayor. So if we lease this out, which will obviously be very beneficial, how does that go with risk management with insurance?
I will pass that through to the director.
Through you, Mayor, they have requirement to have public liability insurance.
So it doesn't come through our insurance.
Pursuant to Regulation 15 of the Meeting Procedures Regulations to discuss the following matters. Do I have a councillor to move a motion to go into closed? Councillor Jessup and seconded Councillor Burgess. All those in favour? That's all councillors. Thank you. I advise that in accordance with Huon Valley Council's audio recording of council meetings policy, recording of the open session of the meeting ceased at